Welcome to the Knife Freak Show. My name is Jonathan McNees, and joined by my co-host, Mr. Chase Boatright.
How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Doing a lot
Good.
better now since I finished the ceramic tile job I was working on earlier.
Yeah.
Well, I got it all put down. I hadn't gone back and grouted it yet, but I got the worst part done. So
I always hated the grouting too, though. But
I don't love it, but it's not as bad as the rest. It just doesn't take as long to.
yeah,
It's not all the getting up and going and cutting stuff, and because I had a wet tile saw set up outside, so I was running back and forth. Anyway,
yeah.
this isn't a construction zone podcast, so.
Well, I mean, it's been sort of a maintenance top week or top few weeks for me, so I'm getting close to it. First, I had my oven go down, and that's why I was at your shop last week when we did the live stream. And then this week, I don't know if you saw, but my grinder went down on me.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, the tracking, the screw for the tracking wheel stripped out, and the bolt stripped out. So I couldn't just find a bolt and figure it out. And it was a welded on nut, so I had to do some redneck fabrication and get it working in the meantime. I mean, I called Ameribraid, and they basically said they don't make them like that anymore, and so here we're sending new parts to you. So so they took care of it right away, and we're great about it, but still got stuff to do in the meantime. Still need the grinder.
Yep, still need to be grinding.
But yeah, so it's been.
That's cool. I've never actually owned any Ameribraid stuff, but from seeing their stuff, like they seem to innovate a lot. They seem to be constantly coming up with new stuff. So they're very interesting.
They are.
They in the market for another one. I might have to look at them.
Yeah, they seem to think outside the box that a lot of other grinder companies don't think in.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's from their different background and stuff like that, but I've basically been using it for 3-4 years now, and this is basically the first problem I've had out of it. So
yeah,
and
that's not bad.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Right.
Not cool that grinder's torn up, but
yeah, especially considering the timing that
Yeah, that's when everything's always going to happen when you're leading up to a show or something. You can just about count on it.
Yep, and on that note, Blade Show Texas is 25 days away at the time of this recording, which is on Sunday.
25 days.
Yeah.
So coming up pretty quick. That's pretty quick for us.
Yeah.
Those of you that are attending and may looking forward to it, it may seem like a while, but yeah, that's a lot to get done between now and then.
Yeah, especially considering having to leave a day or so early to get out there and all that. And,
yeah, we've got actually less time than that to get done, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yep. But I am really looking forward to it, and I think that's kind of the only real news that we have this week of anything kind of noteworthy is that Texas is coming up, and like I said, 25 days away. And we've mentioned it several times on the show, but guys, if you're able to come to the Texas show, I highly encourage you to do it. It's turning into a really cool show. Ever since Blade Show took it over, it's really been growing, and they're doing their thing with it. It's kind of like a mini Atlanta, but with, I don't know, it's kind of just got a different vibe. Honestly,
I've heard that a lot.
All three of the shows kind of have. It's partly, I think, because you're in a different geographical area.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just that. Atlanta brings people from all over.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have a fair amount of locals there that are local-ish or local, but it brings people from all over the world. So like you're around just, tons of people from everywhere there. It's a really big mix. Texas, I would say, there's still people from all over the world, but I would say it's a lot more local crowd than you get probably at Atlanta, or at least maybe just it seems that way because it's not as big and crazy or whatever. But
yeah, I mean, to kind of drive that point home, like right behind me, there was a guy from Australia, and then the next row over from that was GTC, who's from Brazil, and then across the aisle there was a guy from South Africa, and so it's
I think maker wise, people are still coming from all over the world, and you're gonna have some customers that are still coming from all over the world, but I think on the customer side of it, it's not as broad. I feel like it's more people that are, it's a really hardcore knife enthusiasts that travel from, wherever, and then you got a lot more, seems like, local crowd there. I
Gotcha.
know when we talk to people and ask them where they're from and stuff, it just seems like there's a lot more people that are from Texas when we're at that show versus people that are from Georgia when we're in Atlanta.
Gotcha. Yeah,
So
yeah. I wasn't thinking about it on the customer side, I guess. So yeah,
yeah,
that's cool. I
yeah,
mean,
oh yeah. There's still plenty of people from all over the world coming to exhibit. So
yeah,
for sure, it's not like a little local show or whatever. We just get the local makers there. It's for sure got people from all over. But I do think the customer base is slightly different, and I I get along pretty good so far with the Texas folks. So they're not that much different than the Alabama folks. Doesn't seem like so.
yeah,
The it was a pretty fun show for us. So
yeah. And that's
and on
March
that show,
7th and 8th for
yep,
those that are wondering. And it's the Fort Worth Convention Center, I think, is where it's held at. But you can go to
yeah, okay,
bladeshowtexas.com and get all the information,
yep,
tickets, and all that stuff. So,
yep, that's right. And it's excuse me, it's a really pretty area.
mm,
Not knocking Atlanta, but like I don't really care to go out and about too much around Atlanta.
mm,
Um, but there, which we don't go out. I mean, we're usually working and like mingling and networking and all that. So we're usually not very far from the hotel there either. But just the whole kind of downtown area there and everything is pretty cool to me. I like it. It's a little different.
gotcha.
That, and I don't know that the Atlanta one is so much that it's in Atlanta as it is just the location of the venue. Like there is some cool stuff around there with the stadium and stuff over there. If
Yeah.
but um it's not exactly in like a downtown kind of area either.
No,
So
it's sort of outskirts, like
yeah, it's not
sort
as
of a,
much stuff kind of like right there in walking distance. Like
yeah,
there's stuff close enough, but it's not quite the same.
yeah,
It's the Texas show seems a little different as far as that part of it goes. There's lots of restaurants and all that stuff right there around the venue and all. So
sweet. I was going to
yeah,
ask you offline, but considering other people
yeah.
may want to know as well, is there anything similar to the pit that sort of happens at Texas, or is it just
No, not that I
no?
know of. I don't know of a particular hangout spot there that I can remember seeing.
Yeah,
If there are, there may be, and we may just not be cool enough to know about it yet. But we may, we may not be in with the cool kids crowd.
yeah,
But no, not that I know of, because it's partly I think because the venue is separate from the hotel, like it's not part of the hotel and all,
yeah,
like Atlanta is. So I don't know of. I think for the far as I've seen, other than just people kind of hanging around outside the lobby and stuff like that, but not anywhere that like goes on, you know, big gathering place into the night like the
gotcha.
pit does. So
I
yeah,
remember seeing. I don't remember if it was at Blade Show West or Texas, but a couple years ago, I remember seeing somebody like trying to organize basically a pit type thing.
yeah,
It was at like a separate location, and they rented
yeah,
out a venue or something, and
yeah,
a whole bunch of people came. But I don't know if that's still going. I don't remember
yeah.
who that was. So
Cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Cool idea. I think it's always going to be a little bit of an uphill battle when people have to completely leave.
yeah,
You know, I mean, it's all the venue in Atlanta. For those of you that aren't familiar, it's the hotel where the majority of people stay. Not everybody, but the majority of people stay is connected. It's all technically in the same building. It's a pretty good little walk, down a few hallways and stuff like that. But to get to the actual venue for the show, but it all is still in the same building and still connected. Versus when you start having to get people, getting transportation from the venue to somewhere else, people end up scattering, and
yeah,
these people are going to this restaurant, these are going to this bar, and it's not as much of a centralized meeting place like there is in Atlanta. But
yeah. I mean, I guess that's one of the things that can keep Atlanta special, because that's one of
yeah,
my favorite parts is being able to just you know you're sitting there walking around next to legends that are just
literally rubbing elbows with
yeah,
with everybody in the industry. Yeah, it's
yeah.
pretty cool. I
So
used to drive Amy crazy, and I still do it occasionally. Some now, I'm not as bad. I know I used to drive her crazy. We'd be walking there, and I'd be like, "That's Bob Trezola."
I did the same
You know,
thing.
hey, look in here. There's, like just,
Yeah,
and I know she was just like, just shut up. Like, she was always nice about it, but like it was, yeah, it's pretty cool. Like I still do, still get a little kind of starstruck when some of them, it's like, And actually get to talk to people then. I mean, like
Yeah.
stand there like last year, we actually, speaking to Rick Henry, we got to stand and talk to Rick Henry for a good little while.
Yeah, I came
Down there
in on that conversation for a little
area.
bit, and
Yeah,
that was
which I mean, that's super cool, man. And just
yeah,
be in a casual setting like that, get to sit there and talk to somebody that you look up to, and get advice and stuff. It's really cool.
yeah.
So it's a very good opportunity. But shifting it back to Texas, let's before we get off of that subject, let's let everybody know your table number so they can start getting it on their agenda.
On the map, I am at 10K. So in the tables
10K.
section, I am at 10K. So
All right,
that's where I'll
cool.
be.
And we will be at booth 309. So um, that's about all I know.
Yeah.
I know a couple of my neighbors and stuff or whatever, but other than that, I don't know. I think we're kind of central-ish
Yeah.
in the booth area, if I remember looking at the map correctly. So
Yeah. And I think I'll almost be able to see y'all, but it may
yeah,
depend on where,
how the
the
aisles
other
lay.
booth in
Yeah,
between is, and, if there's
right.
banners hanging up and all that. But
Sure.
so, yeah,
Yep.
not too far
So
away.
that's yep. So that's coming up. And one thing we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but on the note of shows, something I guess maybe a lot of people don't think about that I think about a lot when it comes to shows, and I know you do too, is like figuring out how to display at shows and stuff.
Oh, God. Yeah.
So, and I have to this day, I still have never had 2 years back to back where I'm like, okay, our setup's good. Like this is the way I want it. Let's just do this again next year. Like I'm never satisfied with how the table or the booth or whatever looks like. It's just always something I'm wanting to change.
Yeah.
So
I'm
it's
never satisfied either, but usually it gets to be like it is right now. And, I got 25 days to finish all the knives. I don't have time to be building a new display or
right.
worried about,
Right. You
this, that,
almost
and the
need
other.
like somebody to help, like, yeah,
Yeah.
like some sort of a designer or something to help lay out and plan everything for the stuff. And
Yeah.
the table can be by, I obsessed over it. And you wouldn't necessarily know that. Now, it doesn't mean I'm good at it, guys, but I did obsess. I tried all
Same.
kinds of stuff. And then I'd
Yeah.
look back on it and later in pictures and videos and stuff, and I'd be like, man, I really don't like the way that looked or whatever. Cause I mean, you want your overall presentation to be representative of your brand,
Yeah.
and it can be really hard to figure out that and trying to get noticed, trying to stand out from the crowd, and get where people can see you. And
Mhm.
it's a lot of logistics there to think about that
Yeah.
guys don't think about.
Yeah. Trying to
So
display it in a cool way that, makes sense for your brand, but also easy to transport is another thing that's,
yeah.
and some guys don't do the easy to transport thing. I know there's some guys that lay out all sorts of stuff and they
Oh
bring
yeah.
in like
I mean,
6 totes
very elaborate. Yeah.
to fill up a table. And I'm like, dude, like, you know, that's a
Yeah,
lot,
yeah.
but
I've tried to kind of strike that balance, as you know, because you
yeah,
even now to this day, you end up helping us some with
yeah.
the booth coming over. So
I mean, with a
I try to
booth, I
keep
feel
it
like if it's 6 tubs worth of product, that's different. But with,
right.
just decorations and stuff, I mean, that's,
Yeah, it's I think you can get carried away with it.
hmm
I don't ever want to be the point that it distracts from
hmm
the knives, from the product and stuff.
yeah,
But at the same time, again, you do want to. I also don't like it when it looks like people didn't put any effort into it either, and
this
it's
is
like
true.
just slap a banner up and like,
Yeah,
here I am. Like I don't know. There's a balance there somewhere,
yeah,
and that's just my personal. There's nothing wrong with just throwing a banner up, where which is honestly like for Texas, this will be our first time having a booth anywhere besides Atlanta. So Atlanta we kind of have figured out because we drive there, which we're driving to Texas too. But in Atlanta we always have more help. We always bring it'd be me and Amy, and we always bring at least one other person with. Ever since we've had a booth, we bring an employee with us, and then you usually come over and help out. We've had some other people kind of help us in the past,
yeah.
but in Texas it's just going to be me and Amy. And so
Amen.
like I'm not taking the big heavy like wall and booth and all that we've
Oh,
got to
okay.
move in there. And I'm sure we could probably find somebody to help us out. There's plenty of just
Yeah.
our community's awesome, but I'm not gonna bank on having to go ask somebody for help. So
Well, I mean,
we are going with basically like a big banner for the back, and then
yeah,
uh, I'm actually probably fixing to order some new tables, some like high rise tables or whatever, and we're gonna probably get some, if we have time, get some custom tablecloths made to go on them, and
yeah,
that's probably going to be maybe some runners or something, but like nothing super elaborate as far as like a big wooden wall and
Yeah.
Countertop and all that like we do at Atlanta. But
Yeah.
anyway,
That makes sense. I
and then
mean,
when we go out to Utah, we have to fly. So, and I could ship stuff out there and all that, but you gotta figure out where the line is and what's worth it as far as the expenditure and all the trouble and stuff and what's not. So
yeah.
anyway, just one of those things that we all have to think about that not most customers probably don't think about. I mean, they probably admire some of the booths that are the more elaborate ones at the show, whatever, but not many people probably realize what all goes into doing that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
some of them are very, very elaborate, very time-consuming, very costly.
Yeah, like the Vegas Forge guys, like theirs is all like metal and welded pipes and LED lights, and I'm like, that's a lot.
Oh yeah,
but
and all the guys that the bigger guys that get their like big signage hung from the ceiling and stuff, like they're having to rent boom trucks, like they're having to pay the logistics people. I mean, it's a small fortune to do all that stuff. Like there's a lot that goes into it, which kind of goes back into the discussion a few weeks ago about all the kind of hidden costs that people don't think about with knives. Like all of that factors into the cost of your business. That's whatever you do, that's marketing. That's all. That all what you sell your knives for. How many you sell, how much money you bring in from your knives is all goes into a pool, and it has to go in all these different places. Like
every
it has to cover
direction.
all these different things. It's way more to think about than just I covered the cost of my materials and a little bit of labor, and that's it. Because otherwise, you don't have any way to cover doing any kind of marketing and logistics for shows and stuff like that. So anyway. All right, before we get too hung up on that, I guess we should probably move on. I believe you have a freak of the week for us this week.
I do, and it's a maker that I'm talked with a good bit. He's a fixed blade maker. His name is Jakeb Ginsberg. His Instagram account is @JakebCreates, and he works out of San Diego, California, and he just I don't know how many he puts out as many knives as he does. I mean, I know he uses some machine shop stuff, and like he's got some friends out there that help him with machining of different stuff. But like still, even with that, I believe all the blades are hand ground, they're hand contoured. He's still doing all the kydex, and like I mean, he also uses some leather and stuff too from another leather maker and all that. But just the consistency and the quality of his work is constantly impressing to me. He does a line called the Hail Mary series where it's basically same handle shape and a bunch of different blade shapes, and he's been doing a lot of those lately, and they just every single one of them looks as good as the last, and they're all just tight and right, and that's impressive to me. Consistency and like not just consistency, but also like an excellent quality of consistency is, one of those things that just impresses me because it's hard to do. And
consistency, if it's not good, is consistency on something bad is not a good thing.
Yeah.
But consistency and quality together for sure are important. So that's cool. Yeah, I've seen some of his stuff too. I don't follow him as closely as you do, but yeah, definitely some good looking stuff. So
that, and he's also he's a, I guess, champion of the knife community. Anytime, I guess some of our younger makers, friends that I talk to and stuff, like, anytime one of them's running a lottery or auction or one of them has something for sale, he immediately reposts it. He's giving them shout outs. He's always happy to help as far as technical stuff and knowledge and whatever else. He's, super good dude. So y'all go give him a follow.
Yep.
He's
absolutely
doing good work. So that's @Jakeb Creates, and Jakeb is with a K and an E. JAKEB Creates. Yeah.
So a little weird, but hey, that's okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, dude. Like,
it happens.
Not weird. So is it Jakeb or is it Jake B?
Yeah, I think it's Jakeb. I'm pretty sure it's Jakeb.
Jakeb. Okay.
Yeah, because in his profile it says Jakeb Ginsberg, but it looks like Jake B is why he's asking.
Screen names and the name people use on Instagram sometimes throw me off a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I've never,
trying to figure out.
I've never seen his driver's license or his social security card. But,
Makes sense,
he makes cool knives. That's all I know.
Very cool. Jakeb with an EB makes cool knives. That'll work.
That's it. But yeah,
No,
just
I
wanted to
think
give him
you
a
had
shout
at
out this
least
week.
one. Yep, absolutely. Um, glad to be able to spread the word about some other people doing good stuff, because
Yeah,
there's a lot of them out there. A
yeah.
lot of people deserve a lot of recognition. So, I believe you had at least one question for us, maybe a couple.
Yes, we're jumping into questions.
Well,
Okay.
the one was I guess that wasn't technically a question. Sorry. The question about our businesses, I'll just,
Oh,
since
okay.
I've already mauled it, I'll just, yeah.
I,
Actually, Amy posed the question, I
yeah,
think, to me, that it would be a good topic, which would be just because we kind of hinted around about some stuff about it in a way, I guess, like just talked around it,
yeah,
but basically that to kind of lay out where we see our future plans for our businesses going.
yeah,
So, kind of what our goals are. What, I mean, not necessarily too specific, but just a
yeah.
general idea of what our goals are. So, since I mauled the intro to it, I'll let you start off while I recover my mental capacities here.
Oh, great. You're gonna hand it off to me, yeah. Me having
Yeah,
all the plans in the world. Yeah,
might or might not have been planned, but
yeah.
you want to
Well,
hit it
um,
first.
yeah. That was a question that one of supporter of mine and yours and the podcast had posed, and you had kind of mentioned it too. So I figured it'd be a good thing to hit on, was sort of where do we see our businesses going. And for me, I'm trying to get to that point where I can get a CNC at some point, and sort of lessen the time as far as like individual handwork and increase production, and that whole thing that CNCs do. I don't know if I'll ever, at least in the near future, I don't know if I would necessarily want to go full bore and do like what you're doing with a whole bunch of people, because I
Right,
thought that was what I wanted to do. And then you put me in charge of people for a brief amount of time, and I was like, I do not really care for this. I don't like being in charge of other people. It's hard enough being in charge of myself at this point, so I don't think I've got that, I guess, maturity level as far as a business owner and stuff yet. So, um, where I'm not confident enough for, sound enough to know where, like, if other people do things wrong, I will, take it worse than say you would or something. It
right,
I think it requires a certain level of maturity to get to that point where you can
yeah,
kind of take that on the chin when like for example, when I came in your shop and screwed up something, burned through 8 drill bits trying to drill one hole, and I don't know if I would handle that as well. So because I burned through some
well,
drill bits now.
I haven't always handled it as well as I should either. But I was going to say, when you first started talking about that it's it is kind of a maturity thing to a certain extent. And
Yeah,
I mean, you're way younger than I was when I started making knives. So, but even in the beginning, like I don't know that it's as much an age. Some of it may just be a straight up age thing,
mm,
but some of it may, I think, is a maturity as a, maybe not so much a knife maker, but as a business owner, like you said.
yeah. I wasn't
Just
necessarily
to
saying
kind
like
of,
social maturity, although I am possibly considered just a big kid, but
but
then
there is a certain amount of just, I mean, because it's hard. It can be really hard for somebody that's still pretty young themselves to look at hiring people and having them work for them. Like, it's, that's actually a question that gets asked a lot to on some of the podcasts and stuff that I listen to, as far as like business type stuff, like
yeah,
younger people trying to figure out how to get, you know, how to communicate with people that are under them, that are actually older than them, and stuff like that. So, like,
yeah,
there's a certain amount of that too. But yeah, I think, and dude, I mean, it just develops. I mean,
yeah,
some people, I mean, when I was as far into it as you were, I probably would have said that I wasn't, anywhere near ready to like deal with hiring somebody, where I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing well enough to, which is still true a lot of days now.
I
But
mean, yeah, it's also
um,
sort of a confidence thing, I think, like where I don't know if I'm doing everything right, so I don't want to hitch somebody else to my wagon at this point either. So
right, right.
like
So you said, question you a little bit on it here. So you
yeah,
said basically, I feel like you probably kind of want to maybe at some point go the like full production route, but it'll just be a matter of whether you get comfortable with hiring people and that kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
But
Probably,
other
yeah,
than
more so productionized, I guess. Like, not, I don't know if I'm, you know, I don't necessarily enjoy making like full custom, well, I do and I don't. I don't know. Like, there's days
right,
where like I want everything to be consistent is my main thing, and I struggle to do
right,
that with my hands in my current
right.
process, and so
Well,
that's one
not
of the
not
things.
to discourage you, but that's also another big challenge when you start taking on employees.
Yes,
Like,
that's
it's hard enough to get to do things consistent yourself, but then to teach other people, especially if you get more than one person doing the same job,
mhm.
like that can be very difficult to get consistency from one person to the next and stuff.
Yes.
So not impossible, but it's definitely requires some patience and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, ideally, like I would really like it if this is totally like dream world, I guess. But you know if what was my perfect day in a knife making shop in a knife making capacity, it would be prototyping and designing would be my job, and then somebody else would be responsible for making it and getting it out to the other people. But every day for
right,
me would just be that, because the prototyping, that first one when you're initially making it is
right,
exciting. You do everything
right,
and everything's just clicking and rolling and you're excited about
right.
it. That's what I would like to
You're
capture.
creating. Like you're not. I feel like when you start making, when you're prototyping, it's creating. When you're once you prototype and you're doing more of something you've already done, you're making, but it's not necessarily creating.
Yeah, you're
I've never actually
recreating.
stopped and thought about it like that. But yeah,
Yeah,
you're kind of like recreating, or you're just making,
yeah,
but you're not. You're still you're still creating something. You're still taking raw materials and creating a product out of it. But you're not. But you're really creating when you're prototyping. You're taking something that's in your head and turning it into an actual object, a real life object. You know
yeah,
what I mean? So yeah, I can see that.
yeah,
And to be honest, dude, that's like what you're describing is what a lot of the that's pretty close to kind of what I do now.
yeah,
Um, Still with some other stuff thrown in, and for sure some of the other people that are farther along than me. I mean, that's for sure
yeah. I mean,
what a lot of them do. So
I would want to hire somebody else that was like the public figurehead also, and like the
uh,
they're the
yeah,
overseer and stuff, and I'm just
well,
the
yeah,
you know I'm
that's
just the guy.
doable too.
But
Yeah,
that's the hard part about trying to do that. I mean, I guess I'm sort of describing like some of the designers out there that sort of just design and prototype and send their
right.
stuff off to get it made overseas. Well, I just don't want to do the overseas part. So
I got
that's
you.
the hard part, and I guess I would want to also control the manufacturing process because I'm a bit of a control freak also.
Yeah,
So there, I wouldn't want to just send it off to anybody either. So I would want to be hands off, but I also couldn't at the same time.
yeah,
So
yeah. I get you.
there's the
Yeah,
future of
it's
my business in a
hard.
tangled web of words.
Yeah. Well, but that's so for now then this so that's I think probably it's just one of those things whether you can kind of come to terms with some of the stuff that's involved with going that route.
Yeah,
And time will tell on that. I know. I mean, you certainly have the capacity to do it if you ever decide to do it, for sure. But so in the meantime, you're talking about getting a CNC.
hmm
Are you? So you're basically just wanting another tool to help to basically do what you're doing now, but be able to do it with more volume and you mentioned consistency, of course,
yeah,
too. But essentially allow you to do what you're doing now, just with an increase in volume
basically, yeah. That's the near
and cutting out
future.
some of the annoying,
Yeah,
time consuming stuff that drives
yeah.
you crazy.
Profiling 10 sets of titanium frames one after another is not the
Gets a
funnest
little
thing.
monotonous.
So yeah,
Yeah. Of course, so does loading and unloading pallets. So
this is true.
doesn't take as long as profiling handles, but yeah,
Yeah,
it all still, yeah,
yeah. If I could get a shape to start with, and that would help a lot of things, and have the holes already all where they're supposed to be, and those
right,
sort of things. Like instead of clamping every one to a pattern and doing
right.
the whole
Some of the
thing.
stuff is, yeah, is a total pain to
Yeah,
do and to try to be repeatable and trying to use, just patterns and stuff like that. Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
I know exactly what you mean. So for the foreseeable future, that's your plans is to try to build up to get a CNC
yeah,
and be able to kind of streamline your production a little bit more, but still be making essentially handmade knives with a CNC.
Yeah.
Which brings me to I'm going to go ahead and say this on here to hold our feet to the fire and just so that I don't forget. But in a future episode, maybe next week, I want to talk some about the uh, kind of the blurring of the lines between everything to do with our
Yes.
industry now. Like what things are called like, custom production, mid-tech, small batch, like whatever, like, just the titles and stuff. So that's probably a pretty deep rabbit hole. So we'll save it for uh, another episode, but for
Yeah.
sure that ties into that. So,
So, what about you as far as the future of your business and where you're wanting to go?
uh, so I know, but I don't know. Um,
Same.
I definitely do not really have a ceiling for how big I would like to get and stuff, except for the fact that I feel like at some point you kind of reach, if you get to the capacity where you can make a certain number of knives, and I don't know what that number is, but I kind of feel like if you get to the point where you're making a certain volume of knives and stuff, that you're kind of moving into a different category than where we're at now as far as the, you know, number one, the price point, because you don't typically have really big companies that are making thousands of knives, making knives at the price point that we make knives at.
Yeah.
Um, but so but at the same time, like I guess kind of where I'm looking now is something like Chris Reeves knives. Like they're a pretty big operation. I don't know exactly how many employees they have. I've asked him, and I think I remember what he said, but I don't want to quote it because I don't remember for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
they're much bigger than we are. Like we've got lots of room to grow to even get near that point. And they've still been expanding. So
Yeah.
and they're still, they're kind of in our category. They're still as far as price range and the types of stuff that they build. So I feel like they're a pretty good example of where I would like to go. Not necessarily, I mean, and again, they're still getting bigger. So
Yeah.
I don't know how far you can push the envelope with getting bigger and making more knives before you kind of push yourself out of that, you know,
Yeah.
small batch or whatever kind of production
Yeah.
or the higher end production type stuff. And I mean, I may be totally wrong. Chris Reeves knives might, quadruple in size over the next 5 years and still have a 4 year backlog. I hope they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
I
I
mean, that'd
mean,
be great. So,
it's
I may be wrong. There may not be a ceiling to it. You may be able to just, as long as you do things right, you may be able to, just keep increasing capacity to, with no ceiling to it.
yeah. I mean,
But
I don't know the size of the company at all, but like Randall Knives, I mean, they've been around, you know, close to
they've
100
been
years at
around
this
a long
point,
time.
like
Yeah.
80 years, and they've still got a 5 year backlog right now.
Right.
You go on their website to order a knife, and you got to wait 5 years, and you can only
Yeah.
order one every 3 months or something like that.
And I
Because
don't know a ton about them either, but I
yeah, I don't
think
either. But
part of that too is that I don't think that they have changed their manufacturing methods a whole
this is
lot.
true.
Like they're not trying to
Yeah,
streamline stuff. I think they're still basically a bunch of people making handmade knives.
yeah,
You know, so it's you know that's a little, in a way, a little different business model too.
a
I
little
guess
bit. Yeah,
that's kind of where it depends on which kind of fork you take. Because if you start, I guess as long as you don't start, adapting manufacturing methods that kind of cheapen the process or cheapen, that essentially, I don't want to say cutting corners, but
yeah.
like, I mean,
But you know,
there is a difference between the price points and stuff.
yeah,
There just is. There's typically, there's a reason that people can afford to make a knife for, $200 when somebody else is making one for 400 or 500,
yeah. I mean, I think
I know
Buck
it's
makes a good
volume,
knife,
but
but Buck doesn't make a knife that's in the same price point as you or I. I mean,
right.
so
And they're also using parts that are stamped out
mhm.
and different
There's
things like that.
yeah,
It's different processes and stuff. So
yeah,
they're not just taking raw sheets of material and, they are, but they're getting there a different way.
yeah,
So I'm definitely not going to put a in my mind. I don't want to put a ceiling on that. We can only produce X number of knives a year and not turn into a production company that has to sell knives in a lower price point. Because, like I said, I don't. To be honest, like at the age that I'm at, I'll probably run out of life before I reach that point anyway and have to worry about it. So
Yeah.
it's just one of those things. So it's, I mean, it just takes a certain amount of time to build up. I'm not, you know, I just don't foresee. I'm talking about like these plants that have like 2, 3, 400 people.
Yeah.
Like most of those, at least off the top of my head, are not making knives in the $500-$600 price range.
Yeah.
They may have a few special ones here and there that creep up to a little higher price range. Like special edition stuff, or special materials and stuff like that. But their average knife is not in that price range. Whereas you take people that are like Chris Reeves, us, Hinder, Strider, these people. I mean, they are, and
Yeah.
they're
Versus like K-Bar, Buck, ZT,
right. Right.
Kershaw's USA, like they're different things. Different,
Right. And the other ones are not bad. They're just hitting a different segment of the market.
Yeah, different price
I don't know. I'm not sure that I ever want to try to catch that segment of the market. Is, I guess, what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
I don't know that I ever want to shift to trying to have. I don't know for sure that I even ever want to shift to having an actual budget line. Like, I mean, Lamborghini doesn't have a budget line.
Yep.
I mean, which I don't. We don't try to be, as we're not as souped up as a Lamborghini in the knife world. We're definitely more on the utility side a little bit, but it's still, I think there's something to be said for maintaining a slightly more on the higher end luxury end of things than trying to reach everybody.
Yeah.
In all price points or whatever. So there's people out there that are doing well at those price points. So at least for the time being, by next year we may be having this talk, and I may have a completely different outlook. But right now, we're doing all we can do to make everything we can anyway. So it's not like we have the option to jump into making 50,000 knives a year immediately anyway. So, but that's where I basically see it headed. It's something along the Chris Reeves model of continuing to try to grow and find a good balance between trying to maintain higher end knives that still feel special. And I think that's the biggest thing to me is when you get a knife like ours, like Chris Reeves, like Hinder's, I guess maybe I honestly think even if you didn't know that much about the company, I feel like you could almost feel, and I don't mean feel as in like an actual like tactile, like oh, this is smoother than whatever, but like that, just this like feeling, like you can tell that something more went into that knife than like a $200. I'm not knocking Kershaw, but like a $200 Kershaw, like you can just tell that it's not as much of a mass produced item.
Well, I mean, I think if you picked up one Mac 2 today and another Mac 2 in a week, I don't think they would feel exactly the same, and that's not knocking your quality or consistency. But like, I think if you picked up one Kershaw this week and one Kershaw next week, they would basically feel exactly the same.
Right. So, and it's kind of like, so I guess what I'm trying to explain is like, say you go to a flea market, right? And you're walking around, and in a flea market, you're going to find lots of junk and stuff there, right? Say you're shopping for hammers, all right, or whatever. You're looking at hammers, and you pick up one hammer. It's obviously it's a made in Pakistan or whatever. It's just basically it's just a generic, just a generic hammer, right? And then you find another one that's maybe a little bit well used or whatever, and it's obvious that it was like a like a higher end or a handmade or I couldn't tell you a brand, and I'm not talking about like the difference between Pakistan and East Wing. I'm talking about like an old hammer that was made, like back in the 40s or 50s or something. Yeah. Like there's even if the cheap hammer was made in an earlier time in the same time frame, there's still a difference to what the feeling it gives you.
Yeah.
That's, I guess when I'm saying a feeling, it's more not like the actual feeling of the knife, but the feeling it gives you, like the emotional connection or whatever you have with that object. You can just tell there's like a story behind it. There's like, it's like I've always described it as having a soul.
Yeah.
Like it's like that item has a soul. Like when you pick up something that even if it's not used, I mean, if it's used, it's really cool because you need to think about all the stories that it's got behind it and stuff like that. Who used that knife or that hammer or whatever it was used for and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Same thing with machinery. We've talked about it with some of the machines that, like that surface grinder that you got from me. Like it's
Yeah.
it's cool to think about. Who knows? It may have been something completely totally boring, but who knows what kind of stuff was made on that thing,
Yeah.
And so I just feel like there's a difference when you start getting into the really, mass produced stuff. There's a lot of difference between that, just the vibe it gives you, the feeling it gives you, whether it kind of has a soul or not. Like you just can,
Yeah.
you just get that feeling, that vibe from something like that that's not as mass produced and stuff. And if you can produce a good quantity of stuff and still maintain that feeling, then I think you've pretty much like hit a home run.
Yep.
Like that's which. So I guess that's what I'm going for, to produce a good number of stuff, good number of things without reaching the point that they feel just mass produced and start to lose that soul.
Yep.
So
That's a hard balance to try to, you know, to kind of carry if you're,
right.
still trying to produce as many as you can. And, of course, like you said, right now you're still at, don't necessarily have the capability to produce wild amounts, but like, that's a tough thing, I think, for companies that reach that point where they're producing more basically than,
Yeah. Well, I
they,
think I've thought about it a good bit lately, just because again, I'm looking towards the future, and I think one of the things that can kind of help to balance that out is by offering different models and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, if you're making thousands of the same model over and over again, it's going to start to be and feel more mass produced. But if you spread that capability of you can make X number of knives a year, and you spread that out over different models, well, now you're still not just cranking out thousands of the same model over and over. You've got a variety of stuff, and that gives you a lot more room to grow before it starts to feel like they're just straight up mass produced.
yeah,
In my mind, so
yeah. I mean, I agree. That's why, like Chris Reeve, Hinder, Strider, they've
right,
all got multiple models and,
right,
multiple different fan bases for each model and all that. And that's one of the things
right,
that I struggle with because I want to have a whole bunch of different models and sort of a diverse catalog, I guess. But it's hard to be stretched that thin when it's hard to gain any
right,
momentum basically doing a little bit
right.
here, a little bit there.
Yeah, in the beginning, you kind of gotta, honestly, in my mind, it's almost like you need to get one or two really good, you know, things that people like, a couple of good designs that people start to get some attention, get the ball rolling with that, and then before you run it in the ground, then you kind of move on to something else.
Yeah.
Like I kind of feel like you can just shotgun it a little bit too much too, and just you know
Yeah.
spread yourself out too much, and you've got all kinds of stuff out there, and then without giving any one thing. One thing I have learned from doing this is it takes, at least for me, it always has. Now, maybe for other people it does not, but for me, it has always taken way longer for something to catch on and start to get popular and stuff than I wanted it to, or than I thought it should. I come up with a design that I think is super cool and all that, and then it's like make the big announcement, I show it and get some oohs and ahs, but then it's like crickets, and it's like, oh man.
Yeah.
But it's just me being unrealistic and not putting in the time and effort to keep putting it out there, because that's something that you and I have talked about, and I forget on a regular basis and have to remind myself how often you need to put stuff in front of people to get them to truly pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Like, and that's even, and you got to, at this day and age with social media and stuff, you've got to put stuff out there a bunch of times to even get a decent number of people to see it, because each time you put something out there, I'm looking at my account and I'm like, okay, I've got X number of followers and I posted this knife, so I've got X number of people now know about my new knife.
Yeah.
No, like maybe 3% if I'm lucky
Yeah.
saw it, and so it's really easy to get into that trap of feeling like, okay, I've shown the world my thing. Why is the world not responding better? And it's just, oh well, that I didn't know what you were laughing about for a second. Yeah.
Sorry.
So shown the world my new product, and
Yes.
the world is not reacting the way I want them to. Yeah, I definitely don't want to go down the other road.
No.
So, there's a reason we're from the chest up here.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
All right.
So,
On that note, would you like to discuss the mechanics of folding knives?
mm,
Mm,
sure, why not?
yeah.
So this came up. Some of you that follow me and stuff may have seen posts that I made earlier this week about some stuff as far as the pivots and all. And so I just thought it would be good to go ahead and talk about that a little bit on here too, because we really want to try to start educating people on why some of the things are done the way they're done. And I can be honest with you, most of the stuff that I do at this point on our knives is because I've tried the other ways and they sucked. Like I mean, some of it's just from like people telling me stuff or whatever, reading in books or whatever. But at this point, I've tried enough variations of all these things that it's it's kind of just all right. This is what works because all the other ways sucked. So in this instance, what I was talking about was the tolerances of the pivot and it how it fits in the handles. All right. So in other words, how tight the pivot barrel slides through the hole in the handle. So I brought this up because it's come up multiple times lately for us because we put the pivots in a tight press fit. Like we press them in with an arbor press. We don't have any intention of them coming out unless somebody needs to change out the hardware. Which let me just go ahead and say, there is no reason to take the pivot barrel out of a knife unless for some reason there's somehow something actually wrong with the pivot itself, which is like almost never happens, or you're actually changing out the hardware. If you're taking it apart to clean it, to lube it, to whatever, there is no reason to take every single piece of that knife apart and lay it out, other than just that you want to. All right.
Yeah.
There's nothing about that pivot being through the handle that keeps you from cleaning anything, lubing anything else. And the chances of you getting it back in there wrong or messing something up as you're putting it in or taking it out, or it's not worth it. That being said, it's also not that hard to take it out and put the other one in if you kind of know a little bit about what you're doing. So, but back to why we do it that way. So obviously, with us doing that, we're getting people that are like, "Oh, I was trying to take my pivot out and it won't come out. It's stuck," and like acting like it was a flaw. The reason you want the pivot good and tight in the hole is because any play. So there's essentially like a triangle between the lock, the stop pin, and the pivot. All right. And if any part of that has play in it, has any room for movement, then it's going to cause problems. And the lock kind of, I mean, unless you cut the lock too short or whatever, there's not really like necessarily movement there. If there's movement there, it's probably coming from one of the other two, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you just cut the lock too short to where it's whatever. But if it's locking up solidly, then there's not if there's movement there, it's probably coming from either the stop pin or the pivot. So, and typically the stop pin doesn't have much play in it. Those are also they're not as tight of a press fit, but they're a pretty tight fit. Where you really run into trouble is if the pivot has any slack. So, in other words, if the pivot has any ability to move the slightest bit in the hole from side to side, because what happens is when you lock a knife up, you open it up and lock it up. It's basically any slack that's in that pivot is then going to come out of it. So that means it's going to shift slightly in one direction. And if you close it, especially if you close it hard, it's going to shift back the other way. And so, or if you open it, say you open it, and then where you really see this is you open it, even if you open it, unless you open it super hard, which you shouldn't be doing anyway. But if you open it just normal, and then you take and go to cut through something that's tough, or you're pressing down on some wood really hard or whatever, like you do a harder cut, then you're going to see the lock bar move over. So it might be at like 30% and it may move over to 50, 60. If it's really bad, it might even move over to like 70, 80%, which is no good. And it's probably going to stick when it gets there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's happening because when you're pressing down, you're applying enough pressure that it's actually shifting that pivot away from it. And it's allowing the lock to then move over. Right? It's not actually the lock that's the problem. It's the play in the pivot. So, and again, so for us, we started off like when you were helping me make the very first Mac 2s, we started off with a tight press fit.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point along the way, we decided in all my infinite wisdom that maybe that wasn't actually that big of a deal. And it's honestly before I understood this as well. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. So for the ease of making the knives, we started making them with a looser fit, so that it was basically like a slip fit, so that you could push it through with your thumb. Right, you could just take the knife in and out without any tool. I mean, the pivot in and out without any tools. And so, but then started noticing that the locks were doing exactly what I just described. When you go to press down and cut on something hard, the locks would move over. So after investigating and all that, figured out that that was what the problem was. And now that that's gone away, our locks are way more solid since we've gone back to doing them. And this has been months ago that somebody asked me when we did that, and I haven't gone back and tried to figure out exactly when we did that, but it was months ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago. I remember I was over there right about the time you made the switch, and I think it was probably, I don't know, 8 months ago.
At least I was thinking early last year was when
it was
we switched it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, that's, I get people. I actually had somebody. What really prompted me to start talking about this was like we had somebody that I think was on Facebook was like, "Yeah, mine was tight." Somebody was complaining and wanting to know why. How could you get it out? It was too tight. And somebody answered was like, "Yeah, ours was too tight too. We took a Dremel and opened it up, so it's now nice loose." And I'm just like, dude. Number one, you supported your warranty. Number two, you just introduced more play into your lock than you just made the knife worse.
Yeah.
So, and I know it was just because they don't understand this concept or whatever, but like the end result, the knife, when it is assembled and being used, needs to work the best it possibly can. What we don't want to do, there's certain things we have to do to be able to manufacture the knife, but we're not going to cut corners and make it so that it's easier to assemble and disassemble by the end user if that means sacrificing the actual function of the knife. Right. So I do try to put some thought into the end user needing to be able to take apart a knife and take apart, put it together, that kind of stuff. But I'm not going to sacrifice the important functions of the knife when it's actually being used to make it simpler and easier to take it apart and put it together. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like as long as it does not interfere with, the function of the knife, then I'm fine with trying to figure out ways to make it simpler. All of our hardware on ours are T8s. That's to make it simple, so you don't have to have multiple bits. Like it's the part of the reason we went with the threaded standoffs versus the threaded handle is so somebody messes up, strips a screw, something like that, then it's not messing up a whole handle. It's just messing up a standoff. Like there's things that we try to do to make them more user friendly, but not at the sake of sacrificing the actual quality of the knife as a working knife. And so that's one of those things that is, again, there's very few times when you actually should need to take the pivot out. And if you do, we'll be glad to coach you through it, or you can even send it in and we'll do it for you. But I'm actually even thinking about making some little kits that would have like a punch and a little block and stuff that would to basically for people to use for taking pivots in and out if they don't have an arbor press. So, because you can punch them in and out with a hammer and a punch too. You just got to be careful. But
yeah.
So
I've flared more than one pivot.
Kind of rant on
day.
That, but
I said I've flared more than one pivot in my day. I know you have too.
Yep. You have to make sure that you use the right kind of punch or whatever, or it will lead to problems.
Yeah.
So, and actually on ours, to be totally honest, so here's what we do now. Because we started making the pivot fit tighter in the handle, but then we had the same fit on the lock side and the show side. And what we found was it would be such a tight fit on the lock side because our lock side goes on last, right? Mm-hmm. And the pivot screw goes through. And it would be almost impossible to tighten the pivot up enough to push the handle to make it fully seat on the pivot the way it needs to, right?
Yeah.
So we actually had to back off and on the on the lock side, so we actually use two different size reamers. We use a smaller reamer on the show side and a slightly bigger reamer on the lock side. So it's still a snug fit. It's still like a snug slip fit, but it's not so much that you can't overcome it by just tightening the pivot screw. Mm-hmm. And since it's so tight on the other side, that's enough to basically lock it into place and eliminate that play that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So again, a lot of thought, a lot of trial and error stuff went into the way we do these things. So then it's just kind of it's just kind of crazy for them to be, number one, complaining about it, and then being, but I know it's just because they don't understand why, which is why I wanted to talk about it. But then people be dribbling them out and stuff, and we've gone to all this trouble to use specific size reamers for the different handles and all that stuff. And then people are, oh yeah, just dribbling out is good. I'm like, oh man, no, please don't. There is a reason. I can be wrong, but there is a reason for most everything we do as far as how we build these knives.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, most of it's not just random. We're not just, randomly making stuff tight for no reason or loose for no reason or whatever. There's typically a reason why it's made the way it is. So,
yep.
You got any thoughts or anything to add on the mechanical lesson there?
Not really. I think you covered it pretty well. I mean, you're trying to keep a perpendicular axis for the blade, and if this side is, if one side or the other is loose, that allows this thing to wiggle and move and do things. And when you're trying to have a precise here and a precise here with a stop pin, and you're trying to get all that lined up right, well, if one thing is loose, that causes the rest of the system to be loose. And I think you covered it pretty well there.
Yep. So. Yep. And like you were just showing there with that between your fingers, and sometimes it could be just one end, but if the pivot hole on both sides is say you, like we did them for a while, they were just a kind of a snug slip fit.
Yeah.
That, even though it may not feel like it, that still leaves
it's a tiny little bit
of room for that whole thing to shift forward or backwards depending on which way the pressure is applied to it.
Yep.
And guys, you would be amazed. I mean, it's ridiculous how little movement it takes to make a huge difference in the lockup.
Mm-hmm.
It's partially because you're dealing with rotation. All right. So the lock, where it meets the lock bar, we may think about it linearly, but it's not linear. It's a rotation. The blade is rotating. So if that lock rotates the slightest bit in either direction versus that end of that lock bar, it makes a huge difference in the lockup. It can either be locking up too early or not locking up, or be way late with the slightest bit of movement. Because if you, believe me, I've learned from designing stuff, drawing it on the computer and moving something like a half a degree of rotation, and then go out there and do that on the machine, and like the same thing with the detents and stuff. Like anything that involves angles or rotation,
the detents
is magnified significantly over something that's just linear.
Yeah.
So like you can move something by a couple of tenths or like a half a degree in rotation, and like say we rotate the detent ball a half a degree from where it was, and it'll make the difference from it, the detent being perfect to being either having a bunch of lash or not holding
not even
it
in
all.
the hole. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like a half a degree. So like it makes a lot of difference. So the I guess basically what we're saying is the tolerances make a lot of difference. All right. Some stuff the tolerances are not quite as important as others, but when it comes to the lock and any of the stuff up there with the detent and the lock where it's dealing with rotation, it is a really, really important to have tight tolerances. So,
all right. With that, you want to hit a couple questions?
Yeah, let's knock a couple out.
All right. So, do you prefer the simplicity of making a fixed blade or the satisfaction of making a folder? And that comes from Have a Nice Day Knives, Australian designer friend of mine.
That's a good question. I don't really know.
I know.
It's, I kind of, at this point, I would probably say I like the simplicity of doing a fixed blade. When I was first learning how to make folders and it was still kind of a mystery to me, I probably would have answered the other way and said it was a satisfaction of basically, making a folder and everything functioning correctly and all that. But now that I, kind of know what I'm doing a little bit on some of it, I think I've kind of switched back to probably preferring like the simplicity more than the mechanics, like the stuff we were just talking about.
Yeah.
So what about you?
That makes sense. I mean, I definitely prefer the simplicity of making a fixed blade. I am far more familiar and at home with that process, and far more confident in my abilities in that process. And I still feel like every folder is an adventure, and by the time it's done, I just want it to leave. I don't
Yeah.
even like it. I don't even want it. I just want it to leave my shop and never come back. But um, that's how I feel about it. I definitely prefer the fixed
Kind of
beds
different
still.
ends of the spectrum from where we're at on it. Because like I
Yeah.
definitely felt like that a lot too. But then I'm so stubborn that like it would drive me crazy. Like I do not like to not be able to figure stuff out. So you know, to go with that, when I do figure it out, it makes me feel really good. So
Hmm.
it was a love hate thing with the folders, trying to, and it still is sometimes. I mean, we're
Yeah.
still troubleshooting and like trying to brainstorm and figure out why something's doing what it's doing at times.
It is really
But
nice when you find that problem that's been going on for 2 days and you're like, why is this not working? And then all of a sudden you
right,
figure it out and you're like, oh, hey, look at that. It works.
yeah.
But
Or sometimes figuring it out means slamming it down on the bench and all of a sudden it works right.
that's true.
So that
Yep.
has happened.
Yeah.
So
So,
don't
yeah.
recommend it, but if all else fails.
Mm.
All right, you got any more questions for us?
Yes, I do. From Inhaled Tide Pods, I've got what goes into naming a knife? Is it a gradual process or a sudden epiphany?
Let's let you hit this one first. I did the
All
last
right. For me, I've had both, I guess. Sometimes I've designed and made a knife and then be like, okay, I got to give it a name of some sort. And then other times, I'll think of a name and then I'll design something later. And then I'm like, okay, that name correlates with that. And I already have it named before I've ever even made like a physical product or anything like that. And that was sort of what happened with the Muddlarks. I was doing some history reading about like Victorian England and heard about mudlarks. They were basically the lowest of the low of the food chain of the economic ladder, where their job, literally listed on the census, was that they were mudlarks and they would go down to the river and collect bits of whatever they could find and sell it, like pieces of wood, old chunks of coal. They were lucky if they found something that was metal, and that was like a banner day. But so that was sort of where that came from. But then like a lot of my other stuff, like the Cove, I just you know I name a lot of my stuff after geographic landforms and stuff because I have a degree in geography, and I figured I should use it in some capacity at the very least. So, that's where a lot of my names come from. If they sound weird, like Lavaca and Bornhart and Esker, those are all landforms or land features that's where those came from. So if I finish a knife and don't have a name, I go to like a glossary of landforms and look for something that kind of fits. So, what about you?
Some of both, like you said. I can't necessarily think of anything that I've ever like. So I know in the past I've been like brainstorming about names, and then I've written some down. There's probably still some of my notes in my phone that I've still never used.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, my tastes change with time too, so I don't. It's usually more coming up with a name after the fact, and it's usually more like, ah, crap. Now I gotta. I mean, it's sometimes it's like, all right, it's the McNees, medium fighter or whatever. Like I got to come up with something a little bit better than that. Although I have just used very generic stuff like that. I mean, the chopper was just my big chopper I used to make was just the McNeese chopper. Like it was, it was basically literally just what style of knife it was. But
Yeah.
typically it's kind of after the fact, and sometimes it just I don't have as much of a ongoing theme as you do with the geographical stuff. Is that would actually make it in some ways, at least for a while, easier, I guess, until
Yeah,
you're
that has helped. At
and
least
dry and
having
so
like
forth.
a repertoire to pull from, like
Yeah, like you
just
said, you've got to go. You can go check the glossary and look for cool names or whatever.
yeah,
I've done the same thing. Like I at the with the Skybolt, I thought it looked kind of like a missile or a plane or something. So I went and looked up like military. I think it was missiles,
mm,
um, or it may have been aircraft. I can't remember. I don't even remember at this point. But anyway, it was something. Just again, not to me, it kind of looked like that. So then I thought of that. The killer bee. I thought it kind of looked like some kind of like a bumblebee looking thing. The way it was a little odd shaped and stuff. So
yeah,
that's where that came from. The Mac 2 obviously is one of the ones that's the more generic. It doesn't really have a name. It's just got more of a like you know number. And
yeah.
on that note,
I was
I
about to.
did think,
Oh,
huh?
no, go ahead.
Well, so now and maybe it started somewhere. Maybe somebody had used it before I did. No,
Not that I know
now
of, and I knew a lot
Mac has
then. I don't know as
become
much
name.
now.
Well, I do think there may have been one person that I wasn't aware of at the time when I started calling these the Mac twos or whatever. But the machine assisted custom thing, that is not what the Mac stands for in ours. The Mac in mine is literally just a play on my name. Like it's not. I just thought it was cool and sounded good and whatever. Like and then now even at Blaze Show there's a whole award section for machine assisted customs. Like it's a whole thing now.
Yeah,
And so, but to clarify, that is not what it stands for in ours. It's literally just a play on the name. And honestly, the first knife that I did that was production ish, I guess it was probably basically a mid tech, was I wanted something to distinguish the custom stuff from the stuff that was less custom. So I came up with a performance machine thing. And so the first knife was just the performance machine one, so PM1. Well, then after I named that and I got thinking about doing something else, I was like, let's see, PM2. And I was like, I've heard that somewhere. Wait, Ladderco has a PM2. So that's out. So can't use that. And that right there, guys, that's the hardest thing about coming up with a name for knives. It's
yes,
not, it's the hard part's not coming up with something cool sounding. The hard part is figuring out something that's cool sounding that somebody else hasn't already used. And then trying to do due diligence and figure out if it's been used before and that kind of stuff. Like it's just that is the hardest part. And
yeah,
then even then you wonder, did you miss it? And somebody's going to come and start complaining because you stole their name and this and that. But you do what you can. And that's one of those things. Sometimes it just happens. But
yeah.
anyway,
I was gonna
so yeah,
bring up that point, so I'm glad you hit on it of the whole Mac thing because, like, I was there
yeah,
when you were going through this whole process. I own a PM1, and we
right,
were going through that whole thing. So
right.
I almost carried it today, actually.
Yeah. So I was literally I was trying to just kind of keep it simple so I didn't have to come up with like fancy, cool names or whatever for every different model that we did. I was going to keep it kind of nice and neat and have originally, like I said, it was going to be like the PM1, 2, 3, whatever. And then once I realized too late after the fact, after I'd already called that one the PM1, that PM2 wasn't going to work. So, because I guess technically there wouldn't be anything wrong with it in a way, but I
Yeah,
wasn't going to do
I mean
that.
it's sort of a nickname more than anything. But if you say a PM2, people know what
That's
they're,
what people think
yeah.
of, right? It's
So
not technically the name; it's
yeah,
like you said, an abbreviation, but still. So that's when I thought, okay, I'll think of something else, and that's when I came up with the Mac, and like it doesn't actually stand for anything; it's literally just a play on my name.
yeah,
And so it was just the Mac Two, and it was the two because the PM1 was technically so there's kind of like some blurring of the names there or whatever. So started with the PM2 as far as the actual first full production knife.
yeah.
So yeah, and I don't know. And now the next one is actually going to not be the PM3 to really keep things mixed up. So yeah,
Back and
it's
forth.
okay. Which I'm probably fixing. I started to do it today, but I didn't prepare myself or you for doing it. So I'm fixing to drop if anybody hasn't figured it out by now, which people probably have, I'm fixing to drop
I've
the
seen a few
music
people who
over.
figured it out, but yeah,
Yeah,
um,
I'm going to drop. I would hope so. I've dropped some decent hints, so I'm going to I'm going to probably announce that this week what the new model is going to be because we're
sweet,
hopefully going to start prototyping later this week.
sweet.
So
Yeah,
with a
excited about
little
that.
bit of luck, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here, but with a little bit of luck, may have it won't be like heat treated, probably won't be ground, and probably won't be heat treated, but at least a functioning blade and handles, hopefully put together to bring to Texas. But we'll
Oh,
see. So we shall see.
yeah,
But anyway, so yeah, naming is hard. It sucks most of the time. Every now and then you'll have an epiphany, and it's like, oh yeah, that just fits good for that.
yeah.
I'll tell you real quick. One of the ones. Let's see. So two of the last ones that I had to name were the the two new fixed blades we did at the end of last year. So one of them I already had a knife called the Agent. This is just a ring version of it. The reason that one's called the Agent is because a guy I had a neighbor that was a um, state alcohol. What is it? The ABC board.
Yeah.
He worked on the ABC board. He was an ABC agent, and he had a buddy that was an ABC agent that did a lot of undercover work, which I didn't know ABC agents did, but apparently so. And he wanted a knife, and he came over, and he kind of had some features he wanted me to uh, work into the design. So we kind of co-designed it, and then So I just called it the Agent, basically because it was made for him. And so then that was the ringed agent. And the other one that we call the Stalker, I thought, you know what? I love GI Joe stuff from when I was a kid. So let me go look through some of the cool GI Joe names, and I found the one that, I mean, this was obviously like a military fighting style knife. So found one dude that was named Stalker. I was like, looked, and I found some other like Night Stalker and stuff like that names for knives, but I didn't see any with my quick search that were just Stalker. So voila, there you go. One from a real life person, one from a GI Joe character. So I'm all over the place with it.
Yeah. Is the Ridge Runner, is that sort of a play on the Rigid Raider almost? I've been meaning to
No,
ask you that for a long
not
time.
really. So the Ridge
Okay.
Runner was, if you got anybody that's big deer hunters out there, at least in this part of the neck of the woods where we have lots of hills and stuff, big bucks are known to kind of to travel down ridges
Mm-hmm.
a lot. And so since it was primarily designed as a whitetail hunting knife, its Ridge Runner was kind of a nod to like big bucks, basically.
Gotcha. I just didn't know if
So
you kind of carried the Rigid Raider to Ridge Runner, sort of.
yeah, it does kind of, yeah, and maybe that's somewhere in the back of my mind, maybe that being still kind of having that same ring to it
Yeah.
affected my thoughts on it somehow,
I
but
had
it
to
wasn't really
struggle to
any
remember
intention.
to say the right name before I said it. So, yeah.
Yeah, so there's another example. That the Rigid Raider, that's named after a boat that I drove in the Marine Corps. So like
Yeah.
I'm literally all over the place with names. It's just whatever inspires me at the moment, I guess. Oh yeah, the Fixed B.
Yeah.
That was a that was obviously an easy one. That was another one of the generic ones. I already had the Killer B, so that's the Fixed B.
Yeah.
So anyway, but so yeah, I'm not great at naming. I'm all over the place, and
But it is fun to do, I think, to name knives sometimes. But, yeah, I enjoy it at
I
least.
think it's kind of important too. I
Hmm.
mean, obviously, I don't think just a cool name is going to make a knife, but at the same time, I think it does help to
Yeah.
have something that's catchy. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like cool, but something that's memorable and you know sticks with people. I think helps.
Yeah.
So,
I agree. All
all
right.
right,
I think that's it for the questions for today. We've got a bunch more in the backlog. I just didn't want to overload us all in one episode. So,
yeah,
yeah,
we're already pushed over an hour again. So,
again. So, what do you got going on this week or in the shop or current
um,
projects?
quite a bit. We got some of the two fixed blades I was just talking about. Trying to get some of those done for Texas. They shipped the heat treat last week, so we're just in limbo. Well, we'll probably make some handles sometime, maybe later this week for those, and then so they'll be ready when they get back. And then I've got a couple of special. I want to do a couple of semi fancy knives for Texas, so I've got probably some inlays. We're going to do some inlays for those.
Mm.
Biggest thing though is if the material gets here. Our water jet guy was in the middle of moving to a new shop and all that, had to completely break his water jet down and move it and
Yeah, I saw
set
the
it back up.
Instagram post
Yeah,
where they were shoveling that thing out.
yeah,
That
yeah.
did not
Doesn't
look
look like
fun.
fun. Another one of those reasons why he's my water jet guy and I don't buy one.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's back up and running now, and was said we should probably have our prototype parts for the new model probably this week. So we'll have to
Sweet.
make pallets and start those. But I've got the programs pretty close to ready to go on those for everything except basically the bevels. We won't have time to send off, and I've got the blades cut out of Magna Cut, and I'd just rather send those off than if I'd done it out of something simpler. I would have just heat treated them in house and maybe tried to have one hand ground one done to show around at Texas. But anyway, so that's the main stuff. Just getting a few little things finished up for Texas and trying to start the new the prototyping has got to happen whether we get it done for Texas or not. We have to get started on that because
Yeah.
I'm already a little bit behind schedule on where I wanted to be with that this year. So
Gotcha.
that's kind of that. So what about you?
Uh, when my shop's not falling apart and my wife's car decided to break down the other day and all the things just keep breaking on me. But, I
Yeah,
got the oven back up and running. I
good,
got my element in and
good.
got it installed. It wasn't nearly as painful as I remembered. But then again, I
Yeah.
think when yours went out and I had to replace them, it was like I replaced all of them and had to do the whole thing. And I didn't know what I was doing. And yeah,
Well,
but
the element on mine's all one big thing.
oh, it is? Okay. Maybe that was why it
Yeah,
was more
it's
painful.
one big loop, but it goes through like it has two levels of like grooves that it fits in. It's all one big connected loop, but you have to
Gotcha.
feed it through like
Yeah,
pop through and then down and around and yeah.
mine has a left and a right. So like, and the left one was
Okay,
basically
that's
just
better.
a down and an up. Like, so I just had to
Oh
feed the
wow,
wire out the back, come down the loop, and
sweet.
pop it out. So I remembered
That's
it
way
being a
better.
giant pain when I did it for
Yeah,
yours. So
it was because it's really long and it loops around the whole both sides and the back. It's like a continuous.
yeah,
So it goes that through one groove, back down, and back around through the bottom. Yeah, that's a pain,
yeah, it
and it's
was.
deep, so it's hard to. It's like
Yeah,
almost shoulder deep reaching in there. So
yeah. But luckily, mine wasn't that difficult. I was able just to
good.
pop it in and pop it in. I was done in 10 minutes. I put it off for half the day because I was dreading it, and then I was like,
Yeah,
"Oh well, hey, look, it's done."
there you go.
And like I said, I got my grinder currently rednecked, but I checked the tracking earlier, and the parts are supposed to be here Tuesday for my new tracking assembly and all that. So
Good.
should be able to get that back online. And I'm still working on my 5 sets or my fleets of knives
Yeah,
for Texas. They're starting to take shape. I actually got 2 of the fixed blades glued up this week.
good.
So yeah, I'm remembering why I
That's
don't
gonna
do
be in pretty good
Pomones
shape.
anymore.
Is
But
that are those fleets kind of the biggest thing that you have left or whatever as far as
yeah,
getting ready for Texas?
yeah, pretty much. I mean, I've got a couple fixed blades here and there, but for the most part, that's what I'm taking is those
Okay.
5 sets,
Yeah.
and so
Cool.
that's pretty much all
I think that'd
consuming
be
at the
good.
moment. So
Yeah. Awesome. That's
yeah,
a heck of a project.
yeah, it's fun though. It's been
Yep.
interesting.
That's
Between
that's a neat. That's the yeah. It's cool to think about. You know, put some thought into kind of landmark type stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean, and I
I'm trying to
stole
do
the
a lot
idea
more of
from
that kind of stuff.
David Sharp. To be completely transparent, I had somebody ask me the other day that was a good idea, and I was like, "Go tell David Sharp that," because he did like a 15-year, I think, anniversary set where he did a fixed blade in a folder and did
Yeah.
like, I don't know if he did 15 sets, but he did
Right.
some sets
That's
like
cool.
that, and so but
Yeah.
yeah.
Very cool.
All right. I
All right.
think
Well,
that about wraps
so
it up.
yep. Let's make sure we hit them with the email where they can email the
Yes.
site.
That is knifefreakshow@gmail.com. Send us all your questions, suggestions, comments. If you want to yell at me, any of that, concerns to make the show better. Let's go with that line.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep. And guys, we really appreciate you. We also really appreciate it if you would help share out the show. We are growing. We're getting more and more followers on here, and we appreciate that. And again, like as we talked about today, some of it's just us kind of shooting the shit, but like we also going to trying to do some educational stuff. As far as the actual technical stuff about the knives and then the industry in general and stuff like that. So we'd appreciate if you could help us. The more people can get educated on stuff, the better off our community will be. So please help us share the show out and send it to a buddy that is a fellow knife freak, and give us a like, a follow, all those good things, and you can always find both of us on Instagram and stuff. Feel free to hit us up on there. At
Yep.
some point, we'll probably do a account for the show itself, but right now it's running the one account's about all I can handle. So
Yeah. Same.
more than
I
I
don't
can
even do a
handle
good
most
job on
days.
mine. So yeah.
Yeah, me either. So all right, well, we appreciate you guys, and
Let your freak flag fly.